I remember sitting in that cramped waiting room, the kind where every chair creaks and every clock tick feels louder than it should, when my phone began vibrating inside my purse. I pulled it out, expecting maybe a reminder from the pharmacy or a neighbor checking on me. Instead, it was my daughter. My only child. My Angela. I answered with a small smile, already picturing her usual cheerful tone. But the moment she spoke, something inside me tightened. Her voice wasn't warm. It wasn't even neutral. It was chilled, sharp, as if she were discussing something as mundane as a grocery list, not her own mother's life. She said, "Mom, just letting you know, we're leaving for Europe tomorrow morning. I already sold your beach house and the truck. We needed extra cash. So, that's done. All right. Bye." And just like that, she hung up. No explanation. No hesitation. No space for me to respond. 45 years I spent teaching her kindness, putting her needs above mine, pouring every ounce of patience I had into raising her. And she discarded me with a 30-second phone call. A strange thing happened, though. Instead of breaking down, instead of letting the pain collapse on top of me, I felt a stillness, a quiet little pocket of peace in my chest. I breathed slowly, sat back, and held the phone in my hand like it was something fragile. I think even the nurse watching people from behind the counter saw something change in my face. Because what Angela didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. My name is Antonia. I'm 71. Until that morning, I believed I knew my daughter. I believed she still had some trace of tenderness in her. But life has a way of revealing things when you least expect them. My husband, Robert, passed away 6 months earlier. It happened over breakfast, the way some unimaginably cruel moments happen. He brought me my coffee, just like he always did. I remember steam rising from the cup, the soft tapping of his spoon against the porcelain, and the toast he lightly buttered for himself. When he leaned down to kiss my forehead, he whispered, "Morning, sweetheart." His voice sounded tired, but I didn't think anything of it. Those were the last words he ever said. Losing him devastated me. Half a century together, gone with a single misfired heartbeat. After the funeral, I clung to whatever routine I could. And Angela seemed to step in as though she wanted to help me heal. She came by several times a week. She helped me sort old clothes and bills. She insisted I get full medical checks. She stood beside me in grocery store lines and made me laugh at silly recipes she tried. I thought she was showing love. But she wasn't. She was watching me. Measuring me. Positioning herself. Our beach house, oh, that place was the jewel of our memories. Robert and I bought it after years of saving. Angela was 15 back then, restless and full of dreams. The beach house became part of our family history. We celebrated every summer there. Angela brought girlfriends, then boyfriends, then later her husband. I cooked for everyone, scrubbed sand out of the sheets, tended to the grill while Robert told his corny jokes. Those walls held decades of our laughter. And she sold it as if it were nothing more than an old jacket. A transaction. A convenience. And Robert's truck, the old blue Ford he kept cleaner than our own living room. The pride he had in that truck was almost childish. He would lean against the hood after washing it, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve as though he'd just polished a prized antique. That truck smelled like him, the cedarwood aftershave he wore, faintly mixed with the gasoline from his workshop. I could sit in it and feel like he was close by. She sold that too. As I sat there in the doctor's office, I felt a tug in my memory, soft at first, then sharp and urgent. 3 days before Robert passed, he had given me a sealed envelope. We were heading to bed when he pressed it into my hands. "Put this somewhere safe and open it whenever you feel ready," he said. I tucked it into the dresser drawer, thinking I'd look at it after the funeral. But grief has a way of swallowing days. Months. I forgot. But now, after that awful phone call, I knew I had to open it. The nurse eventually called my name, and I saw the doctor who told me I was in good shape for my age. He said I needed more rest and better meals, the usual advice. I nodded politely. My mind wasn't in that room anymore. It was upstairs in my dresser drawer. When I finally boarded the bus home, the city looked different through the window, like everyone walking past was carrying their own hidden secrets, their own private heartbreaks. I pressed my palm against the cool glass and whispered, "Robert, what did you leave me?" I walked slowly into my house, feeling an odd sense of clarity guiding me. Maybe it was anger. Or maybe it was something closer to awakening, like a part of me that had been asleep for years had suddenly opened its eyes. I went straight to my bedroom, opened the drawer, and took out the envelope. It felt heavier than I remembered. I sat on the edge of the bed, the evening light dimming outside, making the room look almost identical to the night Robert handed it to me. I opened it. Inside were stacks of official papers, titles, deeds, account statements. And one handwritten letter. My breath caught the second I saw Robert's handwriting. His pen strokes were always careful, angled slightly forward, as if even his handwriting was determined to move with purpose. "My dearest Antonia," it said. "If you're reading this, it means I've gone ahead of you. I didn't want to worry you while I was alive. So I need you to know the truth now." It was as though the walls around me fell silent. He went on to explain that for decades, he had quietly invested our savings. He had bought properties, small businesses, and undervalued land. He had shares in companies I'd never heard mentioned at home. He had built an empire of quiet growth. A fortune disguised under modest living. And he wrote, "You are wealthier than you think, my love. You always have been. But I kept it from Angela. You know how our daughter is. If she discovered our financial reality, her attitude would change. I wanted her to love us, not our bank accounts. Please protect yourself. Everything is in your name." My hands shook so violently I had to place the letter on my lap. Property deeds, 6 of them. A downtown apartment. A coastal motel. A tall building, 20 stories, the same one where Angela and her husband lived. That building alone was worth more than everything Angela had sold. And it was mine. Robert had transferred ownership to a corporation he quietly created so that no one, including our daughter, would know. I reread the letter 3 times. My heart ached, first from grief, then from love, and finally from something like vindication. Everything Angela had taken from me was a pebble compared to what Robert had secured for our future. She thought she left me penniless. She believed she stripped me bare. But she had no idea she had only brushed the surface. I stayed awake all night, walking through the house, touching the picture frames along the hallway. In one photo, Angela was 5, her arms flung around Robert's neck, her cheeks flushed with joy. When did that little girl get lost? When did she learn to measure affection in dollars? The next morning, my phone rang again. Angela. This time her tone was lighter, almost falsely sweet. She said she had deposited my share of the sale, 30%, into my account. "It's fair," she added, as if she had done me a favor. She and Edward were leaving that very afternoon for Europe. She said they'd help me find a tiny apartment when they returned, something suitable for someone your age. I let her talk. I let her believe her fantasy. When she said, "I knew you'd understand, Mom," I nearly laughed. But I didn't. I saved it. I saved the laughter for after she hung up. Because for the first time since Robert passed away, I felt something powerful. Determination. I was no helpless old woman. I was the legal owner of more than Angela could dream of. She had no idea she had poked the wrong sleeping lion. While she was packing suitcases, planning her European escape, I was already planning something much bigger. I called Robert's lawyer, Mr. Peterson, a calm man with silver hair and a soft voice. I told him I needed a private meeting. He scheduled me for the next morning. That night, I slept deeply. Peacefully. Even dreamt of Robert, sitting in his usual chair, newspaper in hand, nodding to me with that little smile that meant, "You'll figure it out." And I did. When I walked into Mr. Peterson's office, wearing the dress Robert once said made me glow, I placed the envelope on the desk. The lawyer's eyebrows shot up as he flipped through the documents. When he finally looked at me again, he wasn't seeing the quiet widow he'd spoken to at the funeral. No. He was seeing the woman who owned half the block outside his window. He told me everything was valid. Everything was legally sound. Every asset belonged to me. And the beach house my daughter sold. I asked calmly. She had no right to sell it, he said. We can get it back immediately. He expected me to want revenge. Court cases. Punishment. But I had something else in mind. No legal action, I said. Not yet. I want this handled quietly. He blinked. What would you like me to do? And with the calmest voice I'd spoken in months, I said, help me get my life back. But no one must know it's me. That was the moment everything began. The weeks that followed felt strangely quiet, as if life itself were pausing to let me prepare for what was coming. Angela and Edward boarded their flight to Europe that afternoon without so much as glancing toward my window. I stood behind the curtain, watching their cab pull away, the trunk packed with their oversized suitcases, the two of them laughing about future plans they didn't deserve to have. I didn't wave. I didn't even blink. Let them think they'd erased me. Let them think they'd moved on. Because while they toasted champagne on that airplane, I was already taking back control of every corner of my life. Mr. Peterson worked quickly. He was discreet, but efficient, updating me every few days. In the meantime, I kept a low profile in my neighborhood. To everyone around me, I was the fragile widow whose daughter had abandoned her for a glamorous adventure. I let them believe it. In fact, I played the part beautifully. Whenever I walked to the grocery store, people softened their voices and slowed their steps as if approaching a wounded bird. Antonia, dear, are you managing all right? The butcher asked. The cashier always insisted on carrying my bags to the bus stop. The neighbor across the street brought me soup twice a week. I smiled gratefully, thanked them sincerely, and accepted their kindness, even though I could have purchased the entire street if I wanted to. There was something oddly satisfying in being underestimated. People reveal their true intentions when they think you're powerless. One morning while watering the small garden in front of my house, my longtime neighbor Aurora waddled over in her pink slippers, curiosity practically leaking from her eyes. Is it true, Antonia? She whispered, as though discussing a scandal. Did Angela really go to Europe and leave you alone here? She did, I replied gently. She and Edward had opportunities abroad, or so they said. Aurora clucked her tongue in disapproval. That girl never appreciated you. You know I'm right. I didn't comment. Aurora didn't know the half of it. Days passed, then a week, then two. I kept my routine steady, chores in the morning, long walks after lunch, tea in the evening. I needed Angela to believe nothing had changed. And she did. She didn't call. She didn't message. She didn't ask if I was eating, sleeping, breathing. For her, I was a closed chapter. But I knew she would return sooner than she expected. Life has a way of snatching dreams from those who build them on stolen foundations. On the third week, Mr. Peterson called with the first big update. The beach house is officially yours again, he said. The buyers were reimbursed. They had no idea the sale was unauthorized. I felt a wave of warmth rush through me, relief mixed with gratitude and a quiet triumph. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson," I murmured, gripping the phone tighter. "This means more than you know." "And regarding the apartment building," he continued, "the company you inherited is still the legal owner. We are transferring full administrative control to you. It may take another 2 weeks, but soon no decision about that building will move without your signature." Perfect. Angela had unknowingly spent years living in a home her father had secretly secured for our family. And she had treated me as though I had nothing left to offer her. That weekend, I decided to visit the beach house. It had been months since I'd last seen it. I took the bus, just as Robert and I used to do before we could afford a car, and I let the familiar view of the coastline slowly fill my heart. There it was, small, cream-colored, quietly waiting for me. Someone had set potted plants by the porch during the short period the buyers had possession. It looked almost like it was greeting me after a long separation. I stood across the road, watching the sunlight bounce off the windows, listening to the waves whispering behind it. A man stepped out from the front door, one of the buyers, I assumed, and spotted me. He approached politely. "Excuse me, ma'am, are you all right?" "Yes," I replied with a soft smile. "Just remembering. You knew the previous owners?" "For many years." He sighed heavily. "We were told the elderly woman was in terrible health and needed to sell quickly. But it turned out the sale wasn't legal." I stared at him. "Did you meet the daughter?" "No. Everything was done through intermediaries. But someone told us the daughter handled everything because the mother was too ill. It's heartbreaking." Heartbreaking. That was one word for it. Manipulative and cruel also worked. As I returned home that evening, a cold clarity hardened inside me. Angela hadn't just sold my possessions, she had reinvented me into a fragile, sick woman incapable of making decisions. She had crafted that lie so she could move with less guilt. I realized she didn't see me as a person anymore. I was merely an obstacle to be maneuvered around. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. A few nights later, unable to sleep, I paced through my living room replaying the past months in my mind. Every small moment that seemed helpful or loving suddenly looked like a calculated move in a larger scheme. When she brought me to the doctor, was it concern, or was she measuring how much time she had before she could claim my belongings? When she helped with funeral arrangements, was it support, or was she gathering information? When she smiled sweetly at me over lunch, was it affection, or manipulation? The realization stung. But it also empowered me. The next morning, I called Mr. Peterson again. "I want Robert's truck back," I said. "That will be complicated," he admitted. "Your daughter had power of attorney forms giving her permission to sell it." I nearly dropped the phone. Power of attorney. I never gave her. And then the memory hit me. After Robert's funeral, Angela had brought a small stack of documents for me to sign, saying they were needed for inheritance matters. I was drowning in grief back then. I signed without reading. She must have slipped the form in with the others. I closed my eyes, steadying my breathing. "Do what you can," I said softly. Over the next days, life became strangely split. In public, I played the role of the powerless widow. At home, I was reviewing financial statements, learning about rental contracts, analyzing company shares. I began to understand the true scale of Robert's brilliance. The building alone generated steady income. One of the commercial properties had tenants that had been there for decades. And the coastal motel, though small, made more money than I ever imagined. Robert had built an entire future while pretending we were just getting by. A week later, Mr. Peterson called again. "Good news," he said. "We recovered the truck. The man who bought it is a friend of mine. Once he learned what happened, he gave it back." "Thank you," I whispered. Thank you so much. One last thing, he added. We finished transferring full control of the company to you. You now officially have authority over the apartment building. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the quiet power of that sentence. My daughter lived in a building she believed belonged to her husband's family. But it was mine. Entirely mine. Mr. Peterson, I said slowly, I need you to prepare an eviction notice. There was a long inhale on the other end of the line. You're certain? She made sure I lost everything that mattered to me, I answered. Now she will learn what that feels like. I'll prepare the documents. But before he could deliver them, something unexpected happened. Aurora came rushing to my door one afternoon, breathless and agitated. Antonia, you won't believe what I heard. I ushered her in. What is it? Edward, she said dramatically, has huge debts. My brother-in-law at the bank told me they're investigating loans he took out in his name, and your daughter's. They might lose everything. I had suspected as much. Edward had always carried a nervous energy, the kind men have when they're hiding things behind fake confidence. Aurora wasn't done. And I heard they're coming back from Europe. Something happened, some business trouble. Maybe even another woman. I didn't flinch. I didn't gasp. I simply poured Aurora another cup of tea. Because it was all unfolding exactly as Robert would have predicted. Later that night, I stepped onto my porch and looked up at the stars. I felt him there, somewhere between the wind and the quiet. Thank you, I whispered. You protected us even after you were gone. The next morning, Mr. Peterson called with confirmation. Your daughter just arrived at the airport. Alone. Alone. That meant Edward had either deserted her or refused to return. She didn't look well, Mr. Peterson added. The doorman at the building said she had to use the spare key. She was crying. Send the notice, I said calmly. She'll receive it tomorrow. And just like that, the wheel turned. My daughter, the same woman who tossed me aside, was about to learn she didn't know me at all. Angela received the eviction notice the following afternoon, exactly as Mr. Peterson had arranged. While I didn't witness her initial reaction, I didn't need to. I could imagine it all perfectly, the moment she opened the letter, the widening of her eyes, the tightening of her chest, the rising panic as she reread the words that gave her 30 days to leave the apartment she believed she owned through her husband's family. She had no idea that the company evicting her was mine, or rather, the corporate shell Robert had built long ago. All she knew was that her financial world was collapsing on top of her, piece by piece. The next morning, at exactly 8 o'clock, my phone rang. Her name flashed across the screen. I paused, took a breath, then answered as calmly as if I had been expecting a recipe suggestion, not my daughter's desperation. Her voice trembled. Mom. Mom, we need to talk. Please. I kept my tone soft. Good morning, sweetheart. How was Europe? Mom, this isn't about Europe. Please, listen. I got a letter. An eviction notice. They're telling me I have to leave my apartment in 30 days. It must be some kind of mistake. You haven't heard anything about this, have you? I let a beat of silence linger. Eviction. From whom? She shuffled papers on her end. A company I've never heard of. Robert something. Robert Holdings. Robert Investments. Something like that. I'm shaking so much I can barely read it. My heart tightened. She didn't know yet. She didn't suspect a thing. Oh dear, I murmured softly. Are you sure it's legitimate? That's what I'm trying to figure out, she cried. Mom, I just got home last night. Edward stayed in Europe. He left me there alone. He's not answering my calls. He took money that was supposed to last us months. And now this. I don't understand anything anymore. I'm scared. Her fear was real. For the first time in years, she sounded like a little girl who had fallen and scraped her knee. But I didn't rush to pick her up. Not yet. Where are you now? I asked. At the apartment. But I don't know how long I'll be here. I don't have money for a lawyer. I don't even have money for groceries. Mom, can I come see you? There it was, the moment the dominoes fell exactly as I had predicted. She wanted to return to the very woman she had thrown aside. Of course, honey, I replied softly. Come whenever you need. She arrived an hour later. When I opened the door, I almost didn't recognize her. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes rimmed with red, her hair unbrushed. The confidence she once used as armor had cracked into pieces. She stepped inside quietly, as though she wasn't sure she was welcome. We sat at the kitchen table, our old, familiar place, and I poured her coffee. She held the cup with both hands as if the warmth could keep her from falling apart. I made a mess, Mom, she whispered finally. A terrible mess. You've had a hard time, I said gently. That's an understatement. Edward lied about everything. There was no business in Europe. He forged my signature on loans. He owes, God, over $100,000. And the banks are saying I'm responsible because I'm his wife. She choked on her words, tears slipping down her cheeks. And then this notice came. Why does this company want to evict me? I didn't do anything to them. I didn't react. I didn't reveal even a flicker of emotion. Did you talk to a lawyer? I asked. I told you, Mom. I can't afford one. Edward left with the rest of the money. He ran off with another woman. A younger one. I found out when I went to the airport. My key card didn't work in our hotel room. He closed the account. They told me he left the night before with her. I leaned back, letting the silence absorb her pain. So now, she continued shakily, I have nowhere to go. I was hoping, maybe I could stay here. Just for a little while. Until I find a job. Until I figure out what to do. Her voice cracked on the last word. I looked at her carefully. This wasn't arrogance disguised as confidence anymore. This was humility the universe had forced onto her shoulders. Of course, Angela, I said after a long pause. You can stay here as long as you need. She burst into tears. Real tears. Not manipulative ones. Not crocodile ones. They were heavy with regret, with guilt, with a dawning understanding of everything she had broken. She hugged me with such force that I had to hold the edge of the chair for balance. I returned the embrace, but without the blind devotion I once had. This time, I held her with intention. This time, I held her with boundaries. After she calmed down, she returned to her old room with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box, slowly unpacking fragments of the life she had tried to build and watched collapse. I stood in the doorway, watching her fold shirts onto her childhood bedspread, the same faded floral pattern I had sewn decades ago. While she unpacked, she found something she didn't expect. Mom, she called softly. You should see this. I walked in and saw her holding a small manila envelope with my name written in Robert's handwriting. But not the same envelope I had opened earlier. This one was newer. Sealed. Untouched. Where did you find it? I asked, genuinely surprised. It was in Edward's things, she said quietly. Maybe he found it after Dad died and never gave it to you. A new wave of fury touched my heartbeat, but not toward Robert. Toward Edward, who had likely read it, realized it contained something important, and hidden it for his own advantage. Can I open it? I asked. She nodded, watching anxiously. Inside was a letter. And a small key. "My beloved Antonia," Robert wrote. "If you are opening this envelope, it means our daughter is facing a hardship. This key belongs to a safety deposit box, number 247, at the bank downtown. What's inside may help her. Use it however your heart guides you." Angela swallowed hard. "Dad, prepared something even for this?" "Yes," I whispered. "Your father always thought far ahead." "Should we go see what's inside?" she asked, almost timidly. "We can go tomorrow." That night, as she slept in the room she once used to slam doors in, I sat in the living room holding the little key between my fingers. It was cool and heavy, like a physical reminder of Robert's love, of his wisdom, of his ability to protect even after death. But I wasn't ready to use it yet. Angela wasn't ready either. She still needed to understand the depth of what she had done. She needed to grow. To reflect. To rebuild herself, not through comfort, but through experience. Real, grounding experience. The next morning, we went to the bank together. She was nervous, clutching the straps of her bag tightly while we waited for the clerk to escort us to the vault. When the steel door swung open, and the safety box was placed on the little table inside the private room, she looked at me with fear and hope tangled together. I inserted the key, twisted it, and opened the box. Inside lay velvet pouches, small jewelry cases, and handwritten notes. Robert had gathered family pieces, heirlooms, gifts he had planned to give in the future, and even valuables I never knew existed. The estimated worth, according to his note, was around $200,000. Angela gasped. "Mom, this could save us." Save her. That was her first thought. Not preserve history, not honor the family legacy, but use it as a lifeline. But her tone wasn't greedy. It was exhausted. Defeated. She saw the jewels not as shiny objects but as possible redemption. "We could sell these," she whispered. "We could buy back the house. Pay off some debts. Fix everything. Fix everything." How ironic. I closed the box gently. "Let's take it home. We'll think about it." The next several days were an education for her. Not one I administered cruelly, but one the universe handed her without apology. She made calls to jewelry dealers. She researched prices. She cried over pieces she didn't want to part with. And she hesitated, for the first time in her life, before making decisions involving money. Watching her struggle wasn't easy. A mother's instinct is to rush in, to fix, to soften the blow. But I held back. Because this pain was shaping her. Chiseling away the entitlement. Revealing the woman underneath. That week, Mr. Peterson called again. "We have located Edward," he said. "Where is he?" "In Paris. Trying to enter a fake marriage to get residency." I nearly laughed. "We also obtained evidence that he forged your daughter's signature multiple times, deliberately accessing credit in her name. Meaning she's legally innocent. Meaning, he confirmed, we can absolve her from all his debts." My heart swelled, not just with relief, but with pride. Finally, a real chance for Angela. "Start the process," I said. "But do not tell her. I want everything finalized before she knows." As I hung up, Angela appeared in the hallway, looking worn but stable. She had been returning from job applications, rejected again and again because of the clouds of debt hanging over her. "I might have to take a night cleaning job," she murmured. "It's all that's available." I stepped closer. "Are you sure you can handle it?" "I need to," she whispered. "I can't expect you to carry me. I need to grow up." She said it sincerely, without bitterness, without blame, without self-pity. And for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt something deep shift inside me. My daughter was changing. Finally. Angela's first night at her cleaning job changed her in ways I hadn't anticipated. When she came home at almost 2 in the morning, she moved quietly through the kitchen, thinking I was asleep. But I was sitting in the dark, listening to the soft shuffle of her shoes as she tried not to wake me. She set down her bag, peeled off her gloves, and exhaled with a tiredness that came from inside the bones. She didn't see me until she turned to pour herself a glass of water, and when she did, she jumped a little. "Mom, what are you doing awake?" "I couldn't sleep," I told her gently. "How was it?" She hesitated, then let her shoulders sag. "Hard. But not awful. The women there were kind. They showed me what to do. I thought they'd judge me, but they didn't." "Did you feel safe?" I asked softly. She nodded. "Yes. But," she paused, lowering her eyes. "It's humbling. Really humbling. I kept thinking, how did I end up here?" Her voice cracked at the edges. "I had everything. Everything handed to me. And I threw it all away." I stood and wrapped my arms around her. She melted into me, trembling. Not in anger this time, or fear, but in shame. And grief. And awakening. Over the next week, our life found a strange rhythm. Angela spent her days applying for jobs she wasn't qualified for and her nights scrubbing office desks, cleaning microwaves, mopping floors. She came home exhausted, sometimes with her hands aching, sometimes with small cuts she didn't bother complaining about. Yet there was a steadiness in her I had never seen before. She was becoming someone new. Someone I didn't want to rescue too soon. Meanwhile, Mr. Peterson kept updating me quietly. "We've gathered enough proof," he told me one morning. "Edward's forged signatures, false documents, intentional fraud. When this case is filed, the debt collectors will have to remove everything tied to your daughter." "When will it be finished?" I asked, stirring my tea. "Within 2 weeks, perhaps earlier. And Mrs. Brooks, this will completely clear her record." I thanked him. But hung up feeling conflicted. Part of me wanted to ease Angela's suffering immediately. But another part knew, the transformation was still happening. If I lifted all the burden too quickly, she might revert back to the person she was with Edward. The one who believed shortcuts were a reasonable path to happiness. That afternoon she came home limping mildly, but trying to hide it. I noticed right away. "Your foot?" I asked. "Oh. I'm fine. Just stepped on something sharp at work. Nothing serious." I rose. "Let me see." She sighed, then removed her shoe. A small red mark glowed on her heel. "You should disinfect it," I said. She laughed softly. "I know, Mom. I'm learning." "You shouldn't be hurting like this," I whispered. She looked up at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen since she was a child. "It's okay. I need this. I need to feel the weight of things. I spent so many years thinking I was above people who worked these kinds of jobs. I was awful, Mom. Really awful." She swallowed painfully. "I want to understand what I dismissed so easily." Her honesty stung. And healed. And wounded again. The following days revealed even more sides of her I hadn't witnessed in years. She started helping around the house without being asked. She woke early to make breakfast for both of us, even on the days she had barely slept. She offered to pick up groceries. She asked me about my day. She apologized again. And again. And again. Not in a performative way. Not to gain anything. Her remorse was real. One evening, after returning from her shift, she found me sitting at the kitchen table, sorting some of Robert's old papers. She sat across from me and studied my face for a long time. "Mom," she said quietly, "I want to tell you something." I nodded, waiting. These last few weeks, they've been the hardest of my life. But also the clearest. I've been thinking a lot about the kind of daughter I was. The kind of wife I was. And I realized something I'm ashamed to admit. I didn't interrupt. I treated you terribly. I treated Dad's memory terribly. And I let Edward control everything because it was easier than thinking for myself. Every decision I made was for convenience, not for love, not out of gratitude. And when you needed me most, her voice cracked. When you were grieving, I treated you like a burden. Tears streamed down her face. I don't know how you can even look at me. I reached across the table and took her hand. "Angela," I whispered, "everyone makes terrible choices once in a while. What matters is who you choose to become afterward." She nodded. "That's why I'm staying at the job. I know it's not my future, but it's teaching me something Dad tried to teach me my whole life. Responsibility." Those words settled into my heart like a warm stone. One morning, a few days later, Mr. Peterson called again. "We're nearly finished," he said. "The case is complete. Your daughter is officially freed from all of Edward's debts. Everything he forged will be legally reversed. We can organize a meeting to explain everything." I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. The moment had arrived. "Arrange the meeting," I said. "But let me tell her in my own time." "Of course." That afternoon, while Angela was resting before her shift, I reflected on how far we had come. I watched her sleeping through the slightly open door, curled under an old quilt stitched by my mother decades ago. She looked peaceful. Vulnerable. Human. For the first time in many years, she didn't look like someone racing ahead of herself. She looked like someone humbled into truth. The next morning, I told her, "I want you to come with me to see a lawyer. He may help you with your legal issues." She stiffened. "Mom. I can't afford that." "I'll cover it," I assured her. "Let's just hear what he has to say." She reluctantly agreed. We arrived at Mr. Peterson's office on Friday. She looked nervous, her hands twisting in her lap as we sat in the waiting room. When he called us in, she stood as though she expected bad news. He greeted her warmly. "Miss Brooks, I'm glad you're here. I have something important to show you." He handed her a thick file. She opened it hesitantly, skimming the first page. Her eyes narrowed as she read. Then widened. Then froze. This says I'm not responsible for Edward's debts," she whispered. "That he forged my signature on several documents. That he took out loans behind my back. This says I was a victim." "That's correct," Mr. Peterson said gently. "We found evidence. Enough to clear you entirely." Her breathing hitched. "But, how? Who paid for this?" "I didn't, Mom." She turned toward me slowly, confusion etched across her face. I felt the moment arrive like a tide rising. "Angela," I said softly, "there's something I need to tell you." Her eyebrows furrowed. What do you mean?" I took a breath. "Your father left me more than what you knew. Much more." She blinked. "More?" "Mr. Peterson," I said, "please show her the rest." He handed her another folder, this one heavier. Inside were the property deeds. The corporate records. The bank statements. The building ownership documents. Angela stared at the pages, scanning them repeatedly, as if they were written in a foreign language. "Mom," she finally whispered. This says everything belongs to you. The building, the motel, the houses, the accounts." "Yes. This means when I sold the beach house," She stopped, pressing her hand to her forehead. It wasn't mine to sell. It was yours. Yes. She looked at me in disbelief, her mouth barely opening, her voice a whisper stretched thin. How long have you known all of this? Since the day you left me sitting in that doctor's office, I answered quietly. Since the phone call. Her jaw trembled. And you watched me struggle. You watched me cry every night. You watched me work until my hands bled, and you said nothing. I didn't speak. I let her reach the truth herself. Why? She whispered. Why would you do that to me? The question wasn't angry. It was broken. Fractured. Small. I reached for her hand gently. Because you needed to understand what you had lost. And because you needed to rediscover who you were without shortcuts or escape routes. She shook her head, tears dripping onto her shirt. So all this time, you could have saved me. I did save you, I said. Just not in the way you expected. Her eyes widened. Mom. You weren't ready to be rescued, I said softly. You were ready to be transformed. Angela cried openly then, truly understanding, not the financial part, but the emotional one. The human one. The mother-daughter one. She finally whispered, I understand. She did. Angela and I left Mr. Peterson's office in a silence that felt heavy but necessary. Her breathing was shaky, uneven, as if every step was a reminder of how much she had misunderstood her own life. When we reached the car, she placed her hand on the door but didn't open it. She just stood there, staring at the ground, her shoulders trembling ever so slightly. Mom, she finally whispered, how do I even begin to process everything I just learned? I unlocked the door. You don't have to process it all at once. But you carried all of this alone, she murmured. You let me believe you were barely surviving. You let me think I'd ruined your entire life. And all this time her voice cracked. You had the power to crush me or save me, and you did neither. You just waited. Yes, I said softly. Why? Because, Angela, if I had given you everything when you came home, you wouldn't have learned anything. You would have believed the world fixes itself if you cry long enough. I couldn't let you keep living that story. Not after what happened with your father's inheritance. Her eyes glistened. I really was awful. No, I said gently. You were lost. There's a difference. She swallowed hard, then slid into the passenger seat. For the entire drive home, she said nothing. She just stared out the window, occasionally wiping her cheeks when she thought I wasn't looking. When we walked into the house, she set her purse on the table and turned to me suddenly, as if something inside her had snapped into clarity. Mom, she whispered, do you hate me? My heart almost shattered. Angela, I breathed, stepping closer, I could never hate you. But I hurt you so deeply, she said. I left you alone in the worst moment of your life. I stole from you. I lied. I sold things that belonged to Dad, things he treasured. How could you not hate me? Because I'm your mother, I whispered, placing my hand on her cheek. And mothers don't stop loving their children when they're selfish, or blind, or broken. We love them until they learn to love themselves the right way. She leaned into my hand like she hadn't done since she was little. Her tears were warm against my skin. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We simply stood there, stunned by the fragile, sacred closeness that still survived beneath all the damage. Later that night, Angela sat at the kitchen table sorting through papers she had brought back from the lawyer's office. She looked overwhelmed, exhausted, and humbled. I placed a cup of tea beside her. Do you need help going through them? I asked. She shook her head. No. I think I need to do this myself. It's the first time in my life I've had to deal with the consequences of anything. That's not true. She smiled weakly. Mom, it is. I didn't argue. She needed space to feel everything without interruption. After a long stretch of silence, she spoke again. Mom, when did you decide you were going to let me hit rock bottom? I thought about it. The moment you called me from the doctor's office. The moment you told me you had sold the house and the truck as if they were meaningless objects. That was the moment I realized you'd lost touch with who you were. And with who we were. She lowered her head. I'm so ashamed. You've already begun making amends, I whispered. That's all that matters now. She nodded, but I could tell the weight of everything was still pressing firmly against her heart. Over the next 2 weeks, something extraordinary happened. Our relationship, bruised, twisted, dented, began to rebuild itself. Not because I forced it. Not because she begged for forgiveness. But because we finally met each other honestly, as adults who had survived something painful together. Angela kept working at her night job. Even after learning I had enough money for her to never work again, she still went. She woke up early, studied job listings, made herself breakfast, and even helped me clean the porch on weekends. Every evening when she returned, she carried herself differently. Her steps were slower, her voice softer, her words more thoughtful. She no longer complained about small things. She no longer sought shortcuts. She no longer measured herself through what she owned or who she impressed. Instead, she measured herself through effort. One evening, she came home with a bruise on her forearm. I rushed to her instinctively. What happened? She laughed gently. A heavy trash bin slipped out of my hands. One of the ladies helped me bandage it. I frowned. Angela. No, she said quickly, holding up a hand. Mom, this bruise. I earned it. I'm proud of it. She wasn't being dramatic. She genuinely meant it. This new humility, this ability to see dignity in struggle, was something I had prayed she would one day discover. And here it was. A few days later, she sat beside me on the porch after her shift. The night air was cool, the crickets loud, and the moon full. Mom, she said suddenly, I think I want to do something meaningful with my life. What do you mean? I want to go back to school. Maybe study something that helps people. I don't want to live for money anymore. I want to live for purpose. My eyes softened. Do you know what you want to study? She looked up at the stars. Social work. Or counseling. Something that helps women like me. Women who made mistakes. Women who trusted the wrong people. Women who need someone to tell them they matter. I felt my heart swell. That's a beautiful idea, Angela. She turned to me. Do you approve? I approve of anything that helps you become the woman you were always meant to be. She smiled through tears. The next morning, Angela woke up early and sat with a stack of brochures from the community college. She filled out applications, researched scholarships, and made notes in the margins of pamphlets. When she was done, she walked into the living room and handed me a folder. What's this? I asked. My plan for the next year, she replied. Classes. Work schedule. Budget. Goals. I wanted you to see it. I'm not making impulsive decisions anymore. I flipped through the papers, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't see the reckless, entitled woman she once was. I saw a determined adult. A woman who had tasted the consequences of her own choices and refused to make the same mistakes twice. I reached for her hand. I'm proud of you, I whispered. Her eyes shimmered. I'm trying, Mom. Every day. And that's enough, I said. Later that evening, she asked me a question that pierced my chest. Mom, if Dad were alive, do you think he'd be disappointed in me? I took a deep breath. No. He'd be proud of the woman you're becoming now. He always believed people could change, especially those he loved. She closed her eyes as if letting those words sink deep into her bones. And Mom, she said quietly, I'm sorry for every moment I took you for granted. I wrapped my arm around her. I know, sweetheart. And I forgive you. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had my daughter back. Not the one who left for Europe. Not the one who called me from the doctor's office with cruelty in her voice. But the real one, the one who had been buried under layers of pride, pain, and illusion. And now, she was finally rising. 6 months passed like the slow turning of a page, quiet, steady, and full of small victories that stitched themselves into something resembling peace. Angela had enrolled in college part-time, taking evening classes after her cleaning shifts. She often studied late into the night at the kitchen table, her textbook spread open, her notebook filled with neat handwritten notes. The same woman who once believed she had all the answers now sat for hours learning how to ask the right questions. One morning, she walked into the kitchen holding an envelope with trembling hands. Mom, she said, her voice unusually high, the university responded. I turned off the stove. And? She opened the envelope slowly, carefully, as though the paper might crumble under her fingertips. Then she read it silently, her eyes widening. When she finally looked up, her face glowed with a kind of joy I hadn't seen in years. I got accepted into the master's program, she whispered. Mom. I actually got in. I rushed to her and wrapped my arms around her, feeling her excitement vibrate through her body. She wasn't just happy, she was proud of herself. Truly proud. Not because of money or appearances, but because of something she had earned through hard work and purpose. And don't worry, she added quickly. I'm going to pay for it myself. I've been saving from my job. It might take longer this way, but it's important to me. You're sure? I asked gently. She nodded. I need to stand on my own feet. I spent too many years leaning on the wrong people. I want to do this the right way. Later that afternoon, Aurora came over, as she often did, holding a basket of lemons from her garden. She sat across from me and lowered her voice. Antonia, she said conspiratorially, I have to ask. Is it true what people are saying? What are they saying now? I asked, giving her a knowing look. That you somehow solved all of Angela's legal problems. That you got the beach house back. And that she's been paying off debts left and right. People are starting to wonder how a poor widow managed all that. I chuckled softly. People will always talk. Yes, but, Aurora leaned closer. Are you still pretending to be poor, Antonia? I paused for a long moment. There was no point hiding from her anymore, not after everything she'd seen, not after decades of friendship. So I told her the truth. I told her about the envelope. Robert's quiet brilliance. The properties. The secret company. The fortune he had built out of patience and caution. I told her everything. Aurora listened in stunned silence, her eyes widening with each new detail. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and exhaled sharply. My God, she whispered. And you let your daughter think she'd ruined you? Yes. 4 months. Yes. She shook her head slowly. Antonia, that's both incredible and terrifying. I laughed. Terrifying. You let her hit rock bottom, Aurora said. Most mothers would have swooped in the moment their daughters cried. But you let her walk through fire. She needed the fire, I whispered. She needed it to burn away everything that had made her forget who she was. Aurora studied me for a moment, then smiled softly. Well, It worked. Look at her now. That evening, when Angela returned from her shift, her hands smelled faintly of disinfectant, and her hair was tied in a messy bun. She looked tired, but there was a spark in her eyes, a spark I recognized as determination. She placed a stack of papers on the table. "Mom," she said, "my schedule is finalized. I'll need to reduce my hours at work to balance school, but I talked to my supervisor. She said she would try to help me." "That's wonderful," I said. "And there's something else I want to tell you." I waited. "I want to stay here with you," she said softly. "But not as someone who needs rescuing. As someone who chooses to be here. I want to contribute to the bills. I want to share responsibilities. I want us to be partners, not a mother dragging her daughter out of a mess." I smiled. "Angela, you don't have to." "I do," she interrupted gently. "You gave me space to fall apart so I could rebuild myself. Now let me rebuild something with you." I nodded, swallowing the warmth in my throat. A few weeks later, Angela received another letter, this one from the courthouse in France. She came into the living room holding it with 2 fingers, as though it might sting her. "It's from Edward," she murmured. "He sent it from prison." My heart dropped. "Are you going to read it?" She nodded and tore it open. The letter was long, full of regret, apologies, excuses, pleas for forgiveness. He said he'd had a moment of clarity. He said he knew he'd treated her badly. He said he wished things had been different. At the end, he asked her to write back. When she finished reading, she folded the letter neatly and placed it back in the envelope. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "Nothing," she said simply. "I'm not angry anymore, Mom. I'm not hurt anymore. I don't want revenge, and I don't want closure. I just don't care. And that's the most freeing feeling I've ever had." I nodded. Sometimes indifference is the real healing. She smiled softly. Exactly. One evening, as we sat on the porch together drinking tea, Angela turned toward me. "Mom," she said, "I've been thinking about Dad's beach house." "What about it?" "You got it back. It's in perfect condition. And it means so much to both of us." "Yes." She took a breath. "I want to do something with it. Something that matters." I listened carefully. "I want to turn it into a temporary home for women who are trying to leave abusive relationships. A safe place. A place where they can start fresh. I can help oversee everything through my job. You could manage the foundation. We could make it a place of hope." I stared at her in awe. "Angela, that's beautiful." "I want to honor Dad," she whispered. "And I want to honor the chance you gave me to start over." Tears pooled in my eyes. Robert would have loved that idea. He always said a house becomes a home only when it holds more than your own happiness. "We'll do it," I said. Together. The next month was filled with planning, legal papers, meetings, renovations, furniture orders, safety installations. Angela worked tirelessly, juggling school and work and the project. And not once did she complain. Not once did she ask for something to be easier. The night before the shelter opened, she stood in the living room holding a framed photo of Robert. It was taken at the beach house years ago. He was in his favorite chair, smiling with his entire face, sun hitting his shoulders. "Mom," she whispered, "do you think he'd be proud of me?" I cupped her cheek. "He would be proud of the woman you have become." And she smiled, a real, pure smile that softened her whole face. The next day, we drove to the beach house together. The air smelled like salt and promise. Inside, everything was freshly painted, warm, and inviting. Angela walked slowly through each room, touching the furniture gently, as if blessing it. When we reached the porch, she sat on the railing and looked at the ocean, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Mom," she said quietly, "thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me," she whispered. "For letting me break and then helping me learn how to rebuild. For teaching me what love really is." I sat beside her. "You taught yourself, Angela." "I just stepped aside so you could see clearly." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in years, I felt the world align exactly as it was meant to be. Later that night, after she had gone to bed, I walked out onto the porch alone. The moon shimmered on the water. The breeze carried the faint memory of Robert's laughter. "I did it," I whispered, as if speaking directly to him. "Our daughter is whole again." And for a moment, just a moment, I felt him there, warm and proud, lingering between the wind and the stars.